James Marcus had $50 billion, but in this moment, he couldn't even buy a single heartbeat. He thought he was paying for a world-class nurse, a guardian, a savior for his broken son. But as James watched the heart rate of his paralyzed child spike into a zone of pure terror, he realized the horrifying truth. He wasn't paying for a nurse. He was actually paying for an executioner. And she was standing right over his son's bed. To the world, James Marcus was the titan of tech. A man who turned a small garage startup into a global empire. He was cold, calculated, and untouchable. But even the strongest empires have a weak point. For James, it was his son, Peter. 3 years ago, a mechanical failure sent James's luxury SUV off a bridge. James walked away with a scar on his hand. His wife was lost to the river. And Peter survived, but he was left a ghost. Paralyzed from the neck down, unable to speak, and trapped in a world where his only way to communicate was through the frantic blinking of his eyes. For 2 years, James searched for someone he could trust. He fired dozens of nurses, some were lazy, others were only after his money. Then came Sharon Edward. She was perfect. She didn't just care for Peter, she seemed to love him. She would stay late, sing to him, and tell James stories of Peter's small improvements. James gave her everything. A 6-figure salary, a luxury car, and his total confidence. For the first time since the accident, James felt he could breathe again. He thought the Steel King had finally found a heart in Sharon. But James Marcus didn't become a billionaire by trusting people. He became a billionaire by trusting data. James looked at the computer logs for that same night. At 3:05 a.m., Peter's adrenaline levels had reached the same level as a skydiver in freefall. His heart was slamming against his ribs at 140 beats per minute. Sharon's logs said, peaceful sleep. The machines said, pure terror. Someone was lying. And as James looked at the nursery door, he realized that for the last 2 years, he had been sleeping under the same roof as a monster. James Marcus didn't call the police. In his world, if you strike at a king, you'd better not miss, and Sharon had become the queen of his household. He needed proof that was undeniable. He spent the next 4 hours doing what he did best, engineering. He didn't just install cameras, he installed eyes. Thermal sensors to detect body heat, and high-fidelity microphones that could pick up a whisper from across the room. As he looked down at his son, who lay there, eyes wide but body frozen, James leaned in and whispered, I'm watching now, Peter. Just hold on. 1 a.m. Nothing. 2 a.m. Sharon enters, checks the 4 drip, kisses Peter's forehead, and leaves. To any normal observer, she was a saint. But James watched the clock. He knew the data didn't lie. Then, at exactly 3 a.m., the nursery door creaks open. But it isn't Sharon. Or at least, it isn't the Sharon James knew. She walks in with a different posture, cold, rigid, and wearing a pair of heavy surgical gloves. But she isn't alone. James's blood turned to ice. Sharon had brought a stranger into his son's sanctuary. A young boy who looked eerily like Peter did before the crash. James watched, paralyzed with confusion, as Sharon sat the boy down in a chair right next to Peter's bed. Look at him, Peter. Look at your replacement. He's going to have your room. He's going to have your toys. And very soon, he's going to have your father. You're just a ghost now. And ghosts eventually disappear. It wasn't just a betrayal of trust. It was a psychological execution. Sharon wasn't just waiting for Peter to die. She was trying to scare his heart into stopping. And the boy next to her. He wasn't a guest. He was the heir she was preparing to install in the Marcus Empire. James Marcus didn't just want Sharon arrested. He wanted to know why. Why would a woman spend years acting like a saint just to torture a paralyzed child? He ran her fingerprints, not the ones on her fake nursing license, but the ones he'd lifted from the wine glass they shared the night before. The name wasn't Sharon Edward. It was Sharon Vance. She was the daughter of Arthur Vance, the CEO of a construction firm James had ruthlessly crushed a decade ago to acquire their land. James had optimized that company out of existence, leading to Arthur Vance's public disgrace and eventual suicide. James had forgotten the name Vance within a week. But Sharon had spent every day since then remembering him. That's when the cold realization hit him. The brain fog, the fatigue, the sudden tremors he'd attributed to the stress of Peter's condition. It wasn't stress. It was chemistry. Sharon wasn't just replacing Peter. She was turning James into Peter. She wanted them both trapped, locked in their own bodies, unable to speak or move, while she and her son lived in his house, spent his money, and erased his name. She wasn't just an executioner. She was a mirror, reflecting the same ruthlessness James had used to build his empire. "You look exhausted, James. You're working too hard. Drink your tea. You need your strength for what's coming." For the first time in his life, the Steel King was truly afraid. He realized that the accident 3 years ago probably wasn't a mechanical failure at all. Sharon had been playing the long game from the very start. She had killed his wife, broken his son, and now she was finishing the job. James knew he was running out of time. Every muscle in his body felt like it was encased in lead. He couldn't call the police, not yet. Sharon had spent years building her Saint Sharon reputation. Without a smoking gun, she'd claim he was suffering from a paranoid breakdown caused by his own mysterious illness. He had to let her think she was winning. He had to let her move to the final phase of her plan. At 10 p.m., the swap began. Sharon wasn't just planning to move Peter, she was planning to delete him. James watched the monitor, his heart hammering against his ribs. He saw Sharon begin to unhook Peter's life support sensors, the very sensors that had been alerting James to his son's terror. "Tonight, Peter, you officially stop existing. No more Marcus legacy. No more Steel King heir. You're going to a place where nobody knows your name, and nobody hears your screams." This was the replacement. Sharon's son, Leo. As James watched, Sharon began the transformation. She sat Leo on Peter's bed and handed him Peter's favorite tablet. She was teaching him the layout of the room, the schedule of the meds, and how to mimic the silence of a paralyzed boy. The irony was a knife in James's chest. He had spent his life replacing competitors and deleting rivals in the boardroom. Now, it was happening to him in his own home. "Almost time, James. Don't worry. Leo is a very fast learner. By tomorrow morning, the world will see a father and son recovering together, and nobody will ever ask where the real Peter went." Sharon had spent years studying James Marcus the father, but she had forgotten about James Marcus the predator. He hadn't just switched the tea, he had spent the last hour self-administering a high-dose stimulant he'd kept in his desk for emergency board meetings. His heart was racing, but his muscles were awake. James, rasping, "Low, you're right, Sharon. I am a fast learner. I learned how to track a snake the moment I see its trail." James didn't hit her. He didn't have to. He simply pointed at the monitor on his wall. It wasn't showing the nursery anymore. It was showing a live broadcast feed, streaming to every major news outlet and police precinct in the city. The 3 a.m. signal wasn't just a recording. It was a silent alarm triggered by the heart rate monitor. When Peter's heart hit 140 BPM, the footage was automatically uploaded to a secure cloud server. The police weren't just coming for a domestic dispute, they were coming for a kidnapping, an attempted murder, and a decade-long conspiracy. "You wanted me to remember your father, Sharon? I remember him now. He was a man who lost his business because he was weak. But you're going to lose your life because you were predictable. You thought you could replace my son? You couldn't even replace your own soul. Sharon Edward, or Sharon Vance, was sentenced to life without parole. But for James Marcus, the victory felt like ashes. He had won the war, but he had seen the monster his own past actions had created. Money can build a fortress, and it can hire 1,000 guards. But it can't buy back the years lost to hatred. James Marcus closed the billionaire's vault for good. He realized that the only way to truly protect his son wasn't to hide him behind cameras, but to be the father he should have been from the start.